The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched upward into darkness, its walls made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. 12 species sat in their designated sections, each representing civilizations that had mastered space travel thousands of years before humans even discovered fire. At the center of the circular room stood Ambassador Min Jun Park, the only human in a space designed to make individuals feel impossibly small. Min Jun's hands trembled slightly, but he kept them clasped behind his back, where no one could see. He had prepared for this moment for months, ever since the Council had announced they would vote on humanity's continued membership in galactic society. The charges against his species scrolled across translucent screens that floated in the air around him. Too aggressive, too unpredictable, too emotional, too dangerous. The human species has demonstrated a pattern of behavior inconsistent with galactic stability, announced High Arbiter Velketh, a Varek whose body resembled a formation of floating crystals arranged in a vaguely humanoid shape. The Varek had been traveling between stars for over 50,000 years. They spoke with the absolute certainty of a species that calculated every probability before making decisions. In the 73 years since humanity achieved faster-than-light travel, there have been 147 incidents involving human vessels in neutral space. Min Jun wanted to argue that most of those incidents involved humans defending other species from pirates, or rushing into dangerous situations to save lives, when more cautious species held back. But he had learned that interrupting a Varek was considered extremely rude. Furthermore, Velketh continued, humans achieved spaceflight through methods we consider reckless. While other species carefully tested propulsion systems over centuries, humans strapped themselves to controlled explosions and hoped for survival. This fundamental approach to problem-solving reveals a dangerous mindset. A representative from the chorus spoke next, though it was difficult to call it speaking. The chorus were a hive mind species, thousands of small insect-like creatures that moved together as one. Their voice came from all of them at once, creating a strange harmony. We have observed human decision-making processes. They rely heavily on individual judgment, rather than collective calculation. A single human can make choices that affect entire populations, and they do so based on feelings rather than mathematical models. This is chaos, not civilization. Min Jun watched the floating screens change to show footage of human history. Wars, environmental damage, conflicts that seemed senseless to species that had eliminated violence from their cultures millennia ago. He knew what they saw when they looked at humanity. They saw children playing with dangerous toys, primitives who had stumbled into galactic society before they were ready. The Silthara representative raised one of its 6 slender arms. The Silthara were telepaths, able to sense the thoughts and emotions of other beings within a certain range. They appeared almost ghost-like, with translucent skin and large eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies. I must add my observations to this discussion. When I am near humans, their minds are storms of conflicting emotions. They feel anger and compassion simultaneously. They plan for peace while preparing for war. They are contradictions embodied, and such instability cannot be trusted in a civilized galaxy. Finally, Min Jun was given permission to speak. He stepped forward, and his voice echoed through the vast chamber. Honored council members, I understand your concerns. Humanity is young compared to your civilizations. We are emotional, yes. We are unpredictable, yes. But these traits are not weaknesses. They are the result of surviving a world that tried to kill us at every turn. He gestured, and holographic images of Earth appeared around him. Hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, volcanoes, predators with teeth and claws, diseases that swept through populations. Earth is not a gentle planet. For millions of years, it tested us. It forced us to adapt quickly or die. We learned to make decisions with incomplete information because waiting for perfect data meant extinction. We learned to feel fear because it kept us alive. And we learned to feel hope because without it, we would have given up. The council members watched silently. Min Jun pressed forward. You call us reckless for strapping ourselves to controlled explosions to reach space. But that's because we didn't have the luxury of time. We looked at the stars and knew we had to reach them before we destroyed ourselves. Yes, some of our astronauts died. We mourned them, learned from their sacrifices, and tried again. That's what humans do. We fall down, and we get back up. He took a deep breath. You say we're too aggressive. But every incident you've listed involved humans defending others or exploring dangerous areas. We don't start fights, but we finish them. You say we're too emotional. But our emotions drive us to protect the weak, to explore the unknown, to create art and music that speaks to the soul. You see these as flaws. We see them as what makes us human. The chamber fell silent for a long moment. Then Velketh's crystals chimed softly, the Varric equivalent of clearing one's throat. Your speech is noted, Ambassador Park. The Council will now vote on humanity's continued membership in Galactic Society. The voting took less than 5 minutes. The result was unanimous. Humanity was to be banished from Galactic Society. All diplomatic ties would be severed, all trade routes closed, all communication channels blocked. Humans would be given 1 solar cycle to withdraw from all neutral zones and return to their own territory. Any human vessels found outside designated human space after that deadline would be destroyed without warning. Minjun felt something cold settle in his chest, but he kept his face neutral. He bowed slightly to the Council, a gesture of respect that probably meant nothing to most of them. I understand the Council's decision, he said quietly. Humanity will comply with your demands. We will return to our space and leave you in peace. He turned to leave, his footsteps echoing in the massive chamber. But at the doorway, he paused and looked back. I want to say one more thing. Though, you may not want us now, but remember this. We're the species that refused to go extinct. We're the species that looked at a hostile universe and decided to explore it anyway. We're the species that falls down and gets back up, every single time. You're sending us away, and we'll respect that decision. But someday, you might regret it. The Council members said nothing as Min Jun Park walked out of the chamber. 3 months later, the last human ship crossed back into human territory. The communications blackout began. The galaxy moved on without humanity. Confident that order had been restored, 50 years passed in silence. The trading post at Kelvin Station orbited a blue giant star at the edge of what used to be a busy commercial zone. 50 years ago, human merchants would stop here twice a week, trading rare minerals from Earth's asteroid belt for Varric computational crystals and Chorus biological processors. Now the station operated at 30% capacity, and Merchant Captain Thel Nax of the Chorus found himself thinking about the humans more often than he cared to admit. Thel Nax was actually 17,000 individual insects moving as one consciousness, currently arranged in a roughly humanoid shape to make other species more comfortable. He stood at the viewport of his ship, watching automated drones slowly load cargo that used to be loaded in a fraction of the time when human dock workers were around. The humans had a saying, "Many hands make light work." Thelnax had always thought it was inefficient compared to hive mind coordination, but now he understood it differently. Humans worked hard because they cared about doing things well, not just efficiently. The route to Nexus 7 is dangerous again, his first officer reported, the message traveling through their shared consciousness. 3 ships lost to pirates this month. Thelnax felt the collective concern ripple through his being. That trade route had been perfectly safe for decades when human patrol ships watched over it. The humans never asked for payment. They said they were keeping the neighborhood safe, as if the entire sector was just a friendly community. After the banishment, the Council had assigned Varric security ships to replace the human patrols, but the Varric calculated that the economic value of the goods traveling through didn't justify the expense of constant protection. So, the patrols stopped, and the pirates returned. Across the galaxy, Dr. Yuna Choi stood in her laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing data that troubled her deeply. Yuna was not human. Despite her human name, she was Varric, a scientist who had spent 30 years studying humanity before the banishment. She had been fascinated by them, these emotional creatures who somehow built civilizations that shouldn't work according to mathematical models. She had taken a human name as a sign of respect for her research subjects, and she had never changed it back, even though it made other Varric uncomfortable. The data floating around her showed communication patterns, or rather, the lack of them. For the first 20 years after the banishment, there had been occasional signals from human space, radio waves, encrypted transmissions, the normal background noise of a spacefaring civilization. Then, 30 years ago, everything went quiet. Not reduced, not minimal, completely silent. Yuna had been monitoring the border of human space for months, and what she found frightened her. No distress signals, no exploration vessels, no trade requests. Even the colonies humans had established on the edges of their territory had gone dark. It was as if humanity had simply vanished, or decided to stop existing in any way the galaxy could detect. She pulled up historical records from her decades of research. Humans had a pattern when threatened. They didn't submit. They didn't disappear. They adapted. They evolved. They came back stronger. Yuna had watched them survive economic collapses, environmental disasters, and wars that should have ended them. Each time, they rebuilt and improved. So what were they doing now? In their silence, a memory surfaced from her research. She had once interviewed Ambassador Park about human history. He had told her about ancient human civilizations that built walls around their territories when threatened. "We call it isolation," he had said. "Sometimes you need to step back, strengthen your home, and figure out who you really are before you engage with the world again." At the time, Yuna had noted it as an interesting cultural trait. Now it felt like a warning she should have heeded. On the frontier world of Callus Prime, engineer Jiwoo Lee worked on repairing an irrigation system that had broken down for the third time this year. Jiwoo was Silthara, and like all her species, she could sense emotions and surface thoughts from nearby beings. The colonists around her radiated frustration and worry. The colony was struggling. "We need a part that doesn't exist anymore," her assistant said tiredly. The humans used to fabricate custom components on site. They had these portable factories that could make almost anything. "Our equipment can only produce standard components." Jiwoo felt a pang of regret that wasn't her own. It came from the elderly colonist standing nearby, a Varric named Seltreth. His crystalline form flickered with memories. "The humans helped us build this colony," Seltreth said quietly. "When we encountered problems they couldn't solve with technology, they would sit down and think of creative solutions. They called it improvising. I thought it was inefficient at the time. Now I realize it was genius." That evening, Yuna sent a message into human space. It was a simple greeting, a scientific inquiry asking about their status and offering collaboration on peaceful research projects. She followed all proper protocols, used the old communication channels, and waited for a response. 2 weeks later, her message was returned, unread. The automated response contained only 7 words. "Humanity is no longer available for communication." The phrase haunted Yuna. No longer available, as if humanity was a service that had been discontinued. She shared her concerns with the council, presenting data about the communications silence and the strange reports that had begun filtering in from the edges of human space. A chorus merchant had reported seeing ships at the border, vessels with designs that didn't match any human technology in the council's databases. The ships were sleek, elegant, and impossibly fast. They appeared on sensors for moments before vanishing completely. A Silthara explorer had picked up mathematical transmissions that shouldn't be possible. The equations dealt with physics at a level that even the Varric couldn't fully understand. The explorer had tried to make contact with the source, but received only silence. The council listened to Yuna's presentation with what she could only describe as polite disinterest. High Arbiter Velketh's crystals chimed softly. "Dr. Choi, Your concern for your former research subjects is noted. However, the absence of communication from human space is exactly what we desired when we voted for their banishment. They are complying with our decision. We should be pleased. But what if they're not just complying? Yuna pressed. What if they're preparing for something? Humans don't accept isolation quietly. They use it. They transform it into motivation. Then they are welcome to transform themselves in their own territory, another council member said. As long as they remain there, they are not our concern. Yuna left the council chambers feeling a dread she couldn't quite explain. She returned to her laboratory and began a new project. She started mapping every single report of unusual activity near human space. Strange energy signatures. Unexplained gravitational anomalies. Ships that appeared and disappeared. Mathematical proofs that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Each incident was small, easily dismissed, but together, they painted a picture of a species doing something remarkable in their isolation. She thought again of her conversation with Ambassador Park all those years ago. He had smiled when talking about human resilience, and his words came back to her now with crystal clarity. You know what's funny about walls? He had said, everyone thinks they're built to keep others out. But sometimes, they're built to protect the world from what you're building inside. Yuna stared at her data, at the pattern of silence and glimpses of impossible technology, and understood with growing certainty that humanity hadn't been defeated by banishment. They had used it as a chrysalis, and somewhere in that silence, behind their walls, they were becoming something the galaxy had never seen before. She just hoped the galaxy would be ready when humanity decided to emerge. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos, something that had not happened in over 2,000 years. High Arbiter Velketh's crystals flickered with colors that indicated severe stress, while representatives from all 12 species transmitted urgent reports simultaneously. The chamber that had once voted to banish humanity now filled with fear. Commander Jiwoo Lee of the Silthara Defense Forces stood before the council, her translucent form practically glowing with the urgency she felt. Beside her, holographic displays showed the destruction. And even the emotionless Varric seemed shaken by what they witnessed. 3 systems have been completely consumed, Jiwoo reported. Her voice steady, despite the terror she sensed from everyone in the room. The enemy strips planets down to their cores, harvesting all matter and energy before moving to the next target. We estimate 2 million souls lost so far. The beings responsible for this devastation had emerged from dark space 6 months ago. The Council's scientists called them the Devourers, though they called themselves nothing because they never communicated. They simply arrived, consumed, and moved on. Their ships were massive, organic-looking things that seemed grown rather than built. Their weapons broke down matter at the molecular level, and their shields adapted to every attack within seconds. Our fleets cannot stop them, Admiral Thel Nax of the Chorus reported, his 17,000 components trembling in unison. We sent our 7th battle group to Kepler 442. They were destroyed in 4 hours. The Devourers don't just fight us. They predict our every move and counter it before we complete the action. Dr. Yuna Choi stood at her station, surrounded by tactical displays that showed the devastating truth. Every battle followed the same pattern. The Council forces would arrive with carefully calculated strategies, optimal formations, and logical attack sequences. The Devourers would adapt within minutes, as if they could see the future. Except they couldn't see the future, Yuna realized. They could simply calculate it. When every decision was based on logic and probability, when every species fought with mathematical precision, the outcomes became predictable. And the Devourers had been built to exploit that predictability. We need to evacuate the core worlds, Velketh announced, the words causing a wave of despair to ripple through the chamber. The core worlds were the heart of galactic civilization, planets that had been inhabited for tens of thousands of years. The idea of abandoning them was unthinkable. Yet the alternative was extinction. Over the following weeks, the galaxy descended into chaos. Billions of refugees fled ahead of the Devourer advance. The species that had maintained peace for millennia now competed desperately for resources and safe harbors. Ancient civilizations watched their homeworlds die as the devourers consumed star systems with methodical efficiency. The Council tried strategy after strategy, each more desperate than the last, but nothing worked. The enemy was always one step ahead. Jiwoo spent her days analyzing battle recordings, searching for any weakness in the devourer forces. She was a tactical analyst, one of the best in the Silthera military, and her telepathic abilities allowed her to sense patterns others might miss. But these patterns only confirmed her growing suspicion. The devourers fought like a perfect computer, calculating optimal responses to logical attacks. Every council species fought the same way they thought, with careful planning and predictable execution. Late one night, exhausted and desperate, Jiwoo pulled up historical archives from before her time. She searched for any record of the devourers, any clue about where they came from or how to fight them. Deep in the ancient databases, she found a file sealed for over 3 million years. It took her hours to get the proper authorization to open it. But what she found inside changed everything. 3 million years ago, the devourers had attacked the galaxy before. The file contained fragmentary records from civilizations long extinct, species that had faced the same enemy. And they had discovered something crucial. The devourers had been defeated once, by a species called the Kethril. The records about the Kethril were incomplete. But what remained was fascinating. They had used something called chaos tactics. Strategies that made no logical sense, and therefore could not be predicted or countered effectively. The ancient texts described the Kethril as aggressive, emotional, and unpredictable. They fought based on instinct rather than calculation. They took risks that seemed insane, but somehow worked. They adapted in real time rather than following predetermined plans. And most importantly, they won battles not through superior technology, but through sheer unpredictability. The devourers' computational systems couldn't handle opponents who acted illogically. Jiwoo felt her heart's race as she read the descriptions. The Kethril had gone extinct millions of years ago. But she knew another species that fit that exact profile. A species the Council had banished 50 years ago for being too aggressive, too emotional, too unpredictable. A species that fought based on instinct and adapted impossibly quickly. She brought her findings to Dr. Yuna Choi, knowing the Varek scientist would understand the implications immediately. Yuna's crystalline form flickered rapidly as she processed the information. The humans, she said quietly. The Kethril fought like humans. More than that, Jiwoo added. I've been reviewing old records from human conflicts. Every time they faced a superior enemy, they won through unpredictability. They would sacrifice pieces to gain position. They would retreat when victory seemed close, then attack from unexpected angles. They would make decisions that seemed emotional or irrational, but somehow worked. The devourers' predictive systems would fail against human tactics. Yuna was already pulling up communication protocols. We need to present this to the Council immediately. If we're going to survive, we need humanity's help. The emergency council session 3 days later was tense. Many representatives resisted the idea of asking humans for help. We banished them, one chorus delegate argued. Why would they help us now? We told them they were dangerous and unwanted, because that's what humans do, Yuna said firmly. I studied them for 30 years. They're emotional, yes, but that emotion includes compassion. They protect others even when it's not logical, even when there's no benefit to themselves. It's one of the traits we called a weakness. Velketh's crystals chimed softly. Dr. Choi raises a valid point. However, there is another problem. Humanity has been silent for 50 years. We don't know if they still exist, or if they would even respond to our message. There's only one way to find out, Jiwoo said. We send a message. The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The devourers were 3 jumps away from the Council's last major stronghold. In 2 weeks, maybe less, the heart of galactic civilization would be consumed. Pride and principle meant nothing in the face of extinction. The Council drafted a message together, each species contributing. It was part apology, part explanation, and part desperate plea. They acknowledged that they had been wrong to banish humanity. They admitted that they needed the unpredictability and emotional intelligence that only humans possessed. They asked, not demanded, for help. High Arbiter Velketh personally transmitted the message into human space, using the old diplomatic channels that had been silent for 5 decades. To humanity, if you still exist, and if you're listening. This is the Galactic Council. We made a grave mistake 50 years ago when we banished you from our society. We called your emotions weakness when they were strength. We called your unpredictability dangerous when it was adaptability. We were wrong. And we're sorry. Now we face an enemy we cannot defeat alone, an enemy that exploits our logical thinking and predictability. We need your help. The galaxy needs your help. If you can hear this message, please respond. Thanks for watching. And for more. End quote. Also you too. Please. The message transmitted into the darkness of human space. Then the Council waited, hoping against hope that humanity still existed, that they would forgive, and that they would come, because if they didn't, the galaxy would fall. And the last thing the Council would know is that they had destroyed their only hope 50 years too soon. 3 days of silence followed the Council's message. Each hour felt like a year as the devourers advanced steadily toward the last Council stronghold. High Arbiter Velketh remained in the command center constantly, his crystalline form dimmer than usual from stress and lack of rest. Dr. Yuna Choi checked the communication channels every few minutes, hoping for any response from human space. Commander Ji-Woo Lee coordinated the defense of Sanctuary Station, the massive orbital platform where 3 billion refugees now sheltered, their homeworlds already consumed by the enemy. On the 3rd day, as the Devourer fleet entered the outer system, and Council forces prepared for what everyone knew would be their final battle, the communication array suddenly activated. Every screen in the command center flashed with an incoming transmission from human space. The entire room fell silent as a woman's face appeared on the displays. She was human, clearly, with dark eyes and black hair pulled back in a military style. Her uniform was unlike anything in the Council's records, sleek and adorned with symbols no one recognized. Behind her, barely visible, were other humans working at stations that displayed technology far beyond what humanity had possessed 50 years ago. When she spoke, her voice was calm and measured, carrying an authority that made even the ancient Varek pay attention. This is Fleet Admiral Seo-Yeon Kim of the Human Defense Coalition. We received your message. We're discussing it. The transmission ended. The entire command center erupted in confused conversation. Velketh's crystals chimed for silence. They're discussing it? They're deciding whether to help us? Yuna felt something cold settle in her chest. The implications were staggering. 50 years ago, humanity had been a fractured species with dozens of independent governments and competing interests. The fact that they now spoke with a single voice, that they had a unified military command, meant they had undergone massive changes during their isolation, and the phrase, "we're discussing it," carried weight. Humanity was deciding whether the galaxy deserved to be saved. 12 hours later, another message arrived. Admiral Kim appeared again, and this time, her expression was harder to read. Humanity remembers what happened 50 years ago. We remember being called dangerous and unwanted. We remember being told our emotions made us unfit for civilization. We remember watching our ambassador beg for understanding and being rejected unanimously. She paused, and in that pause, the Council members felt the weight of their past decisions. But humanity also remembers what we learned from Earth. We learned that when someone is in danger, you help them, not because they deserve it, not because they'll reward you, but because it's right. Admiral Kim leaned forward slightly, We're coming. But understand this. We're not coming to earn your approval or to beg for membership in your society. We're coming because billions of innocent lives are at stake, and we're the only ones who can save them. After this is over, we'll talk about what comes next. But first, we have a galaxy to defend. The transmission ended, and for a moment, no one spoke. Then, Nax, his 17,000 components moving in agitated patterns, voiced what everyone was thinking. They said they're the only ones who can save us. That's either incredible confidence or they know something we don't. Both, I think, Yuna said quietly, staring at the screens. They've had 50 years of isolation. 50 years to advance without our interference or judgment. I think we're about to see what humanity became when they stopped trying to fit into our expectations. The human fleet arrived 6 hours later, dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. The Council's sensors went wild, struggling to process what they detected. Ji-Woo stood at her tactical station, her telepathic senses overwhelmed by the sheer presence of what had just arrived. "This isn't possible," she whispered. The human ships were nothing like the vessels the Council remembered. Those had been functional, but crude. Built with determination, rather than elegance. These new ships were works of art. Their hulls combining organic curves with geometric precision. They ranged in size from small fighters to massive carriers that dwarfed anything the Council had ever built. The energy signatures were unlike anything in the database. The ships seemed to bend space around them, and their weapons emitted radiation in spectrums that shouldn't exist. How did they advance so far in just 50 years? Velketh asked, his crystals flickering with confusion and awe. They didn't have us slowing them down, Yuna answered. No, Council regulations limiting dangerous research. No debates about proper testing protocols. No other species telling them what was impossible. They were free to push every boundary and take every risk. And this is the result. Admiral Kim's face appeared on the command screens again. Council forces, this is Admiral Kim. We're taking command of this battle. We know you're not used to following orders from humans, but if you want to survive, you'll trust us now. We've studied your previous engagements with the devourers. We know why you keep losing. You're too predictable. They calculate your moves before you make them. So we're going to do something they can't calculate. We're going to introduce chaos. We're going to do something. Chaos. The human fleet moved into position, and their formation made no sense to Ji-Woo's tactical training. Ships scattered randomly, breaking every rule of military coordination. Some moved aggressively forward, while others held back. There was no clear command structure, no logical pattern. It looked like chaos. Then Ji-Woo understood. That was exactly the point. The Devourer fleet entered weapons range, their massive organic ships moving with the same methodical precision they always displayed. They began their attack, weapons targeting the human ships with calculated efficiency. And that's when everything changed. The human vessels moved in ways that shouldn't be possible. They dodged attacks that should have been unavoidable, as if they knew where the weapons would fire before the Devourers did. Ships that appeared damaged would suddenly burst with speed, attacking from impossible angles. Groups that seemed to be retreating would wheel around and strike at enemy weak points. There was no pattern, no predictability, just pure adaptive chaos. They're not following any tactical doctrine, Thelnax reported, his voice filled with wonder. They're making it up as they go, each ship responding to conditions in real time. The Devourers can't predict them because the humans themselves don't know what they're going to do next. But it wasn't just chaos. Ji-Woo realized there was something deeper happening. The human ships fought with incredible coordination, despite having no apparent pattern. They were reading each other, adapting together, creating strategies on the fly that no computer could predict. It was like watching musicians improvise together, each playing their own part while contributing to a greater whole. The human weapons were equally impressive. They fired projectiles that changed trajectory mid-flight, They unleashed energy beams that split into dozens of smaller beams, each targeting different weak points. When devourer shields adapted to one type of attack, the humans instantly switched to something completely different. They were forcing the enemy to constantly recalculate, never allowing them to settle into a defensive pattern. Admiral Kim's voice came over the command channel, calm despite the massive battle raging around her. Council forces. Focus on evacuation. Get those civilian ships out of the system. We'll handle the devourers. We can help fight, Jiwoo transmitted back. We have ships ready. No offense, Commander, but you'll just get in our way. Your ships are too predictable. The devourers will use you against us. Evacuate the civilians. That's how you help. It was a bitter truth, but Jiwoo recognized it immediately. So they focused on what they could do, organizing the massive evacuation while the humans fought. As refugee ships fled the system, Jiwoo watched the battle through her sensors, witnessing something she had never seen before. The devourers, the unstoppable enemy that had consumed 3 civilizations, were being pushed back, but victory came at a terrible cost. Human ships exploded in brilliant flashes as they sacrificed themselves to create openings for their companions. Entire squadrons would ram into devourer vessels, destroying both attacker and defender. The humans fought with a ferocity that terrified and awed the council observers. They didn't just fight to win. They fought as if losing was not an option, as if they would destroy themselves completely before allowing the devourers to pass. 10 hours into the battle, the devourer fleet began to retreat. It was the first time any council species had seen the enemy withdraw. As the massive organic ships pulled back and jumped to faster than light speed, a cheer went up through Sanctuary Station. The impossible had happened. Humanity had won. But when Admiral Kim's face appeared on the screens again, she wasn't celebrating. Her expression was exhausted, and Jiwoo could sense grief radiating from her even through the video transmission. The devourers are retreating, but they're not defeated. They're pulling back to analyze what happened and adapt. They'll be back, probably within weeks. And council members, I need you to understand something. We bought you time today, but we paid for it. We lost over 40,000 personnel in this battle. 40,000 humans who died protecting people who banished us 50 years ago. The command center fell silent. Velketh's crystals dimmed with shame. Admiral Kim, we. Save it, Kim interrupted, her voice hard. We didn't come here for apologies or gratitude. We came because it was right. But now we need to talk about what happens next, because this isn't over. The devourers will adapt to our tactics, eventually. If we're going to win this war, the entire galaxy needs to change how it fights. You need to learn to think like humans, to embrace chaos and unpredictability. Can you do that? Or are we still too dangerous for your civilization? No one had an answer. They could only watch as the human fleet regrouped, tending to their wounded and mourning their dead. These impossible humans who had returned when called despite every reason to refuse. The rebuilt council chambers looked different than they had 50 years ago. The devourers had destroyed the original station, the Perseverance, and this new facility was constructed with help from human engineers, who insisted on adding what they called redundant systems and emergency exits. The practical additions had seemed unnecessary to the Varric. But after surviving multiple devourer attacks over the past months, everyone understood why humans built with disaster in mind. High Arbiter Velketh stood at the center of the chamber, his crystalline form catching the light from the new sun outside the windows. Arrayed around him were representatives from all 12 council species, along with 3 humans who had arrived an hour ago. The galaxy had spent 6 months fighting the devourers, and the war had changed everyone involved. Fleet Admiral Seo Yeon Kim stood with 2 other humans. On her right was Ambassador Taemin Park, grandson of the ambassador who had been banished 5 decades ago. On her left was General Marcus Chen, commander of humanity's ground forces. All 3 wore the same sleek uniforms the council had first seen 6 months ago, and all 3 carried themselves with quiet confidence. The devourers have been pushed back to dark space, Velketh began, his voice resonating through the chamber. They are not destroyed, but they are contained for now. This victory belongs to humanity, whose tactics and technology saved our civilization from extinction. The Council wishes to express our deepest gratitude. Ambassador Park bowed slightly, a gesture his grandfather had made in this same chamber. The galaxy doesn't need our gratitude speech. It needs action. What happens now is more important than what happened then. Agreed, Velketh said, which is why we have called this meeting. The Council wishes to offer humanity full membership with immediate voting rights. We also offer reparations for the years of isolation and access to all Council resources and technology. We hope this can repair the damage done 50 years ago. The three humans exchanged glances. Admiral Kim stepped forward, and her words were measured carefully. We appreciate the offer, but we need to be honest with you. Humanity doesn't want Council membership. The chamber erupted in shocked responses. Thel Nax, his 17,000 components swirling with confusion, spoke for many. You don't want membership? After everything you've done to save us? Let me explain, Ambassador Park said, raising his hands for calm. 50 years ago, my grandfather stood in this chamber and begged you to understand humanity. He tried to explain that our emotions and unpredictability weren't flaws, but strengths born from surviving a harsh world. You rejected him unanimously. You sent us away, and it hurt, not just politically, but personally. Humans are social creatures. Rejection affects us deeply. Dr. Yuna Choi, sitting with the Council observers, felt her crystalline form flicker with guilt. She had voted for the banishment, trusting in the Council's collective wisdom. She had been wrong, Park continued, his voice steady but firm. But that rejection taught us something important. It taught us that we don't need your approval to have value. We spent 50 years isolated, and instead of falling apart, we came together. Earth's nations stopped fighting each other and united under a common purpose. We shared all our technology, all our knowledge, all our resources. We looked at every human culture and asked, what makes us special? What can we contribute to the universe? And we found answers. General Chen spoke for the first time, his voice rough from years of command. We advanced 50 years' worth of technology in isolation because we weren't following anyone else's rules. The Varric said certain experiments were too dangerous. The Chorus said certain research was inefficient. The Silthara said certain ideas were too chaotic. But we weren't in the Council anymore. So we tried everything. Some experiments failed spectacularly. People died. But we learned from every failure and pushed forward. That's what humans do. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Admiral Kim took over. We don't want Council membership because we don't want to go back to being judged by species who don't understand us. We don't want to spend our energy trying to fit into your expectations. We've built something beautiful in our isolation, and we're not giving that up. Commander Ji-Woo Lee, now serving as the Silthara representative, felt compelled to speak. If you don't want membership, why did you help us? Why did 40,000 humans die defending people who banished you? Park's expression softened. Because that's who we are. We don't help people because they're perfect or because they deserve it. We help because it's right. We help because we can. We help because somewhere in our DNA, we're hardwired to protect others, even when it costs us everything. My grandfather told you that 50 years ago, and you didn't believe him. But it's still true. The chamber fell silent. Velketh's crystals chimed softly, the sound of deep contemplation. If you don't want membership, what do you want? Partnership. Ambassador Park said simply. We propose a mutual defense agreement. Humanity will help protect Council space from external threats like the devourers. We'll share some of our technology and teach your forces how to fight unpredictably. But we maintain our independence. We're not rejoining galactic society. We're offering to be your partners, not your members. You would protect us without political integration? Thelnax asked, his collective mind struggling with the concept. What do you gain from this arrangement? Peace of mind, Admiral Kim answered. We sleep better knowing the galaxy is protected. We don't need trade agreements or voting rights. We just need to know we did the right thing. Dr. Yuna Choi stood up from her seat, her crystalline form bright with emotion. I have a question. How did you do it? How did you advance so impossibly fast? The technology we've seen from you shouldn't exist. Your ships bend physics in ways our best scientists can't explain. Your weapons utilize energy states we've never encountered. 50 years isn't enough time for that kind of development. General Chen smiled slightly. You want to know the secret? It's simple. We embraced what you called our weaknesses. Every human culture on Earth has different ways of thinking, different approaches to problems. When we united, we didn't force everyone to think the same way. We celebrated our differences and let them work together. A Korean engineer would work with a Nigerian mathematician and a Brazilian physicist. They'd approach the same problem from 3 completely different angles, and together they'd find solutions none of them could reach alone. Diversity of thought, Park added. It's what you called chaotic. We call it innovation. Every breakthrough we made came from combining different perspectives. The ships that confused the devourers? Designed by teams that included people from every continent, every culture, every way of thinking. That's why the devourers couldn't predict us. We couldn't even predict ourselves. Velketh processed this information, his computational mind working through the implications. You're saying that your advancement came, not despite your differences, but because of them. Exactly. Admiral Kim confirmed. For 50 years, you've operated on the principle that everyone should think the same way, that civilization requires uniformity. But you're wrong. Real advancement requires diversity. It requires people who disagree, who see things differently, who challenge each other. That's what humanity learned, and it's what we want to teach you. Ambassador Park pulled up holographic displays showing human training programs. If you accept our partnership offer, we'll establish training facilities where we teach Council military forces to think like humans. Not to replace your logical thinking, but to supplement it. We'll teach you to trust instinct, to make decisions with incomplete information, to embrace controlled chaos. It won't be easy. Your species have spent millennia perfecting logical thinking. Learning to be unpredictable will be uncomfortable, but necessary, Jiwoo said quietly. I've seen the battle recordings. Every time we fight logically, the devourers win. Every time humans fight chaotically, the devourers lose. If they come back, we'll need those skills to survive. The council deliberated for 3 hours. The humans waited patiently, not pushing or demanding, just available for questions. Finally, Velketh called for a vote. The decision was unanimous. The council accepted humanity's partnership offer. The agreement was formalized quickly. Humanity would establish training facilities on 5 council worlds. They would share defensive technology, but not weapons research. They would respond to threats against council space, but maintain their own independent government and territory. In return, the council would provide resources for humanitarian efforts and recognize humanity's sovereignty completely. As the formal ceremony concluded, Dr. Yuna Choi approached Ambassador Park privately. I need to apologize, she said, her voice carrying genuine regret. I voted to banish humanity 50 years ago. I thought we were protecting the galaxy. I was wrong, Park smiled gently. Dr. Choi, my grandfather mentioned you in his journals. He said you were one of the few council members who tried to understand us rather than just study us. You weren't wrong to have concerns. We were rough around the edges back then. But thank you for the apology. It means something. Can I ask you something? Yuna said. When you received our call for help, when you were discussing whether to respond, what made you decide to come? Park was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. There was debate, yes. Many humans wanted to let you face the devourers alone. They said it was justice for the banishment. But then someone quoted something my grandfather used to say. He believed that the mark of true civilization isn't how you treat your friends. It's how you treat people who wronged you. Do you respond with revenge or with grace? We chose grace. Not because you deserved it, but because we wanted to be the kind of species that chooses grace. Yuna felt something shift in her understanding. Your grandfather was right about humans. You are dangerous. But not in the way we thought. You're dangerous because you make us question our assumptions, challenge our certainty, and face our failures. You're dangerous because you're better than we expected, and that forces us to be better too. As the humans prepared to leave the council chambers, taking with them the formal partnership agreements, the galaxy began implementing changes that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Varick scientists started collaborating with researchers from dozens of species, learning to value intuition alongside calculation. Chorus military commanders practiced making spontaneous decisions without consulting their collective. Silthara diplomats studied human history to understand how emotional intelligence could inform strategy. The devourers remained in dark space, analyzing their defeat and preparing for another attack. But when they came again, they would face a galaxy that had learned from humanity. A galaxy that understood that strength comes not from uniformity, but from diversity. That victory requires not just logic, but also heart. That the best civilizations aren't those that never face challenges, but those that learn and grow from every setback. And somewhere in their corner of the galaxy, humanity continued building, exploring, and growing. Not as council members seeking approval, but as independent partners who had learned the most important lesson of all. The strongest beings aren't those who never fall. They're the ones who fall, get back up, and become stronger for having survived the journey. Humanity had fallen when they were banished. They got back up, and the galaxy would never make the mistake of underestimating them again.